Welcome to the Secure AF podcast. I am Jonathan Kimmett, and we are here with a special guest. We have a new director of security here at Alias Cybersecurity. It's Phillip, and we're going to be asking him some questions about where he came from, who he is, what he does, what he intends to do with us, and generally just get to know him. So, Phillip, welcome. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Jonathan. It's great to be on the podcast again. Actually, I was a guest earlier in the year, I believe it was. But at any rate, I'm Phillip Wylie. I have a background in cybersecurity. January will make 20 years that I've been in the field. Prior to that, I spent a little over 6 years as a sysadmin, and most of my career has been spent on the offensive security side, working as a penetration tester, worked as a red team lead for a while. Over 5 years of my career was spent in consulting.
Okay. So I think what we need to do is we need to have a red light behind you and a blue light behind me, because I've spent most of my life on the blue side. So it'd be a great opportunity to go back and forth on those. Well, I really appreciate you, number one, coming on the podcast again. And number two, just joining the team. I got really excited when Donovan told me that you were going to come and join us, and I think we've got some great opportunities. So give me a little bit about your background. You know, what really got you into doing pen testing and doing that offensive security? I know I was listening to part of your presentation at Security Congress it was last week, and I just found it fascinating, and I really wanted to say for the whole session I had to run. But so give us a little bit of background about how you got into offensive security or that red team side.
Sure. As I mentioned earlier, I actually started out on the blue team side. So my first role was working in network security. So we were doing firewall support, intrusion detection system support, some vulnerability scans, and some risk assessments. And the company hired a new CISO. And when this new CISO came into the company, he had a more modern idea of the way security teams should be run. And he put us in different groups. And I got put into AppSec group, which worked out really well for me because I was managing our third-party pen test, which got me interested in pen testing. And even before I joined the AppSec team, some of the first security training I took was Foundstone's Ultimate Hacking course that they had back in the day. And for the listeners, if you're not familiar with that, these are the writers of the Hacking Exposed books. They actually had these pen testing courses at the time, probably some of the few courses out there. So I took that and then took like a CEH training course sometime along the line. So for managing these pen tests, you know, when I got in that role, I really didn't realize when I was at AppSec before that people actually were doing pen testing as a role. So for managing these third-party pen tests, I got familiar with it. I was doing some vulnerability scans. And so when I got laid off from my job at this mortgage company I worked for over 14 years, I applied for a role as a pen tester at a consulting company, and fortunately I got it. And I think what helped me is I shared my passion about learning, and I did a lot of self-learning because the manager that hired me liked the fact that I was doing this self-learning, because one of the things he always told us when I was working there, he never was really pushing the pen testing courses. He was always telling us to build stuff. Right. So I already had that coming in. So going into that role, I was kind of lucky that they took a chance on me because I didn't have the hacking experience. I had some vulnerability scanner experience and security experience in general. So then once I joined, I had to learn how to hack. So I took the OSCP course to learn the hacking piece of it. So that's kind of how I got started.
Okay. So the Hacking Exposed books, I remember those. This is probably late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember buying those books to learn how to defend because, I mean, it was in the book, you know, here's how you do this. And I would go back on the operating system side and go, okay, how do I stop that? I hadn't thought about those books in years. I know I've got 3 or 4 or 5 of them in storage somewhere. So that's really great. That's really interesting. Well, okay, let me ask you about that. So when you're thinking about that, we had this podcast, I guess it was a couple of months ago. It was Donovan and I were talking about how to get into cybersecurity, and the foreshadowing, we're going to have another podcast. The next podcast we do with Phillip and I are going to be talking about how do you get into pen testing. But the question is, the skills you learned about the hacking process, this mental side of hacking process. How did you learning how to build things, how to get in, how to build your systems and operating systems and applications? How did that help you with the pen test side? What was it that it really gave you from that point of view?
Sure, that along with the sysadmin experience I had helped me with that, because if you want to be even just for instance, kind of one of your first step in the process of learning is the defensive side, learning security in general. So you really need to understand the system and that technology to be able to defend it. And same thing with breaking into it. So you need to understand how the technology works and how the security of it works to be able to break in. So it's kind of one of these things. A lot of times people are getting started out. They're wanting to know, where do they start? They've got to learn all this, technical skills before they could be a pen tester, but you can kind of do that in parallel. So as you're learning Windows, you can learn how to defend Windows and how to break into it. So you can do this all kind of at the same time. So really you have to understand that technology to be able to defend it or be able to break into it. Another thing too is if you get a command line or a shell to a system, a Windows or Linux system, and if you don't know the command line, like at a sysadmin level, you're going to be doing a lot of Googling.
Right. Which we do a lot of Googling in our jobs
Yes.
anyway, but yeah, it gets you more comfortable. That's one of the things that when I took the OSCP course that I took the course, the first 90 days or whatever you're working through the labs, that is where I felt like I learned the Linux side. I mean, I knew Linux, I had used Linux, but I didn't know it until I started doing OSCP, at least being comfortable with it. Running the commands, having that stuff just in my head, not just where I reference it, but it's in the head. It's, you could throw the syntax out, what to do. Because you're just doing it all the time. You're just exposing yourself to it, day in and day out while you're doing the labs. Well, that's great. We talked about, in the other podcast, we talked about how cybersecurity is not necessarily entry level. So if you have entry level cybersecurity, it's not really entry level. I mean, you really got to have some sort of background. I myself came from desktop side, so I kind of came up from the operating system at the desktop level, the user experience, user accounts, things like that. A lot of people come up from networking. Sounds like you kind of come up from the infrastructure or the sysadmin side. Mm-hmm. Where do you see, when we're talking about people who are coming up, where do you see where do you see people getting the most benefit from? That sysadmin side, the networking side, the desktop side, social engineering side. I mean, it's not just the technical side. There's a lot of different things. From your experience in pen test, where do you draw the most from?
I think when you're doing like desktop support or sysadmin work, that's going to be one of the best places to get experience. I mean, if you're a network administrator, you're doing Cisco routers and switches, that's a good experience, but it's not going to give you enough overall depth, because the main thing you're going to be testing are going to be hosts at some point. Even if you're doing a web app pen test, it's running on top of a server. So I think that's where you get the most bang for your buck, either desktop support or sysadmin, which they're both going to be they're going to be similar. Desktop support, you're dealing with more end users. Right. Sysadmin, you're dealing more with the servers, more the shared systems and that type of thing. So you get some similar skills.
Right. No, I agree. I think any exposure you have to like an operating system or a system in general that users are going to be using, is beneficial. But again, that's going to be foreshadowing, because we're going to talk about that on a whole podcast here soon. So stay tuned and check the website. Okay, so you got into pen testing. You started doing pen testing. Tell us about some of those experiences you've had. What are some fun things you had, some things you really learned a lot from, kind of your growth in that field?
Yeah, I'd say one of the most fun experiences I had, my favorite all-time hack, and my license plate actually reflects that on my car, but my favorite all-time hack was SQL injection. I one time got command line access into the internal network through a SQL injection vulnerability. Nice. So I was running my burp suite scans, found that it might be vulnerable to SQL injection. So I started using SQL map to see if it was, to validate it. And sure enough, it was. They had XP command shell enabled. So I was able to get command line access from the internet. And the funny thing about it is the customer, this is my consulting days, the customer filed a risk acceptance because it was a development box.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, for all you risk managers out there listening to this podcast, you understand what all that means. So that's really funny. So I got to ask. I don't ask this very often, except two pen testers. When you got in, how did that make you feel? Was that like woohoo?
Oh, it was a rush. Yeah. And it came at a really good time because I was in Mississippi. My mom was in hospice care, and so my daughter and I lived out of a hotel for a month, and it just not very happy times at all. And it's like the universe or God or someone gave me this win,
Yeah.
and it was kind of a little nice to take my mind off of the things that are going on. And so it's always a big thrill when you get access to a system, whether it's domain admin or getting access from the internet through even a network pen test or application pen test.
Right. No, that's great. And it does feel good when you get in. Okay, so tell me another story. What was it that really? So that was your kind of that win. What's been some of the stuff you've really learned about organizations, about yourself, about the world, I guess, from pen testing?
I'd say some of the lessons I'd learned, and kind of one of the things for anyone that's a pen tester or consultant, is sometimes you're doing these pen tests and it's almost like your lawyer trying to defend your case, because sometimes they don't believe it. Sometimes these sysadmins, Unix admins, network administrators have put in all this time to secure things, and they just can't believe, okay, they think that they're patched and secure and you got in, and they can't figure out why, and you have to prove to them.
Yeah.
And also lessons learned from that too is when you're coming in to a pen test, always let them know from the beginning, we're on the same team.
Yeah.
This is a partnership. I'm trying to find weaknesses that may exist so you can make yourself more secure, kind of level set that. And I think also along with that, a lot of times people want to celebrate the ponage or, hacking the system. But at the same time too, you got to be, kind of friendly towards and empathetic with the people you're doing the test for, and not, be a bad sport. It's kind of sportsmanship and security is just pretty much as there is sports. So I think also too, when you're doing your pen tests, I think it's always good to list the things that they did well.
Yes.
That you're not coming in just totally trying to beat them up, make them look bad.
Yeah.
I've done pen tests before where I went into places and they had really good physical security. I made sure to bring that out on the pen test report, and then bring out any other areas I thought that they needed further testing in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a CISO, that was really helpful to me, because if I got a bad report, or if I got a pen test report and it just showed all the problems, I mean, it looks like I failed my job. And I did, to an extent. I mean, you always want to catch those things before the pen tester, but certainly before the attackers do. But it's also very useful when I go to the board, if the report shows, hey, we were able to get these things done. We were successful in terms of, preventing these attacks. There are things we need to work on. We need more funding or more resources or whatever. So it is useful from a CISO perspective of having both sides, the side of how you were successfully able to SQL inject into an application we were running, but also that you couldn't get in these other ways. It was both useful to me. I could spin both sides whenever I was talking to the board. So that's good. That's something that, honestly, it was very refreshing when I worked with Alias beforehand. The reports were very different than I saw from other groups and from other pen testers and actually it was even different from what I learned in OSCP. How you write those reports, what you do. We do all that. We do have those pieces in there, but there's that other piece of, let's demonstrate what they did well. Here are the things that did not work. So anyway, that's just a extra little tidbit there about when you're writing your reports. Okay. So what'd you do after you became a pen tester? You had a few years experience. Give me a little bit more about yourself and kind of what you did. I know you speak a lot, and so I want to get into that piece of it.
Sure. So after about 5 years of consulting, back then, a lot of companies didn't do internal pen tests remotely. They still weren't open to the idea of sending out a laptop or a Dropbox. A lot of people wanted to see the consultants on site. So I was doing a lot of traveling and wanted to get out of the traveling. So I went to work for a bank doing pen tests for them. And it's a good experience because before that, my experience was performing the pen test, but it was good to be an internal resource and see how that works both ways. Because as a consultant, there may be a pen test that typically you'd only get 40 hours for, but as an internal resource, you might get 4 weeks instead.
Right.
And so that's kind of the difference, because companies don't always have the budgets to have, if they got so much testing they need to be done, sometimes they'll have an internal team as well as using consultants. So I kind of got to do that, see both ways and see how it was being done. And I could see some of the gaps and things that we weren't doing right internally, because sometimes some of these internal pen test teams, they were built, people started there, they didn't really have experience outside of that. So what they're doing is what they've come up with, and they just hope for the best that they're covering everything the way they should. So that was kind of experience to see the difference and kind of see some of the gaps that are possible, for organizations that, if they're not doing things properly, what they're missing out on. Because one of the things I've seen a lot of too with pen testing gaps is because of the compliance pen testing, which really brought the importance of pen testing around, but a lot of companies were just doing it for the checkbox compliance.
Right.
But some of the things you see, the scopes being so narrow, maybe they're just doing purely PCI, and just because you're PCI compliant don't mean you're not going to get breached. Right. There's a lot of companies that are compliant with every regulatory body that's out there. They can still get breached if they're not making sure to thoroughly have those systems tested properly, making sure you're setting the goals, not just beyond the compliance, to make it give you more bang for your buck.
Yeah. I do a lot of PCI stuff. I've been doing it for years, and I always made good friends with the QSAs because, they're who you're working with. And one of the QSAs made a joke to me once that he never met anybody that had a PCI breach that was PCI compliant. I sat there and I thought about it for a minute. It's like, okay, well, that's not fair. And he just starts giggling. He goes, well, I know, but if you were PCI compliant, you wouldn't have got breached. So if you got breached, you weren't PCI compliant. And so he and I argued about that for a little bit. Anyway, it was just a little funny. So your pen testing experience, I really like that different viewpoint of the internal, because you're right. You get to spend so much more time, and you're ingrained in the organization doing that pen test, as part of that organization, as opposed to coming in from the outside, doing all the attacks that, you put this list together in your head of things you're going to try. But when you're inside and you have this internal knowledge, that you can really test controls, and you can really get in deep into some of the systems, the subsystems of the network. So that's really good experience. I don't think a lot of pen testers get to have that type of experience, and I can definitely see a lot of learning doing it that way.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
Yeah.
And I definitely recommend anyone that's working as an internal resource, spend some time consulting, because you can learn a lot, because, you're in this one, depending on the size of the environment. The bank I work for, we were busy with pen tests all the time, but there's some environments small enough that you're not pen testing full time. And so when you're pen testing as a consultant, you're kind of learning in dog years. What you would learn in this one company, you're only, working for the bank. I was only doing one pen test per month, where working in consulting, I would have done 4 pen tests that month. Different environments, not the same place over and over again.
Right. And you get to know the people and the processes that they go through. And sometimes those processes help you, and sometimes that, gives you another way in, so. All right. So let's talk about your speaking. When did you get into, because I also want to talk about your podcast and other things that you do, but when did you get into speaking? When did you start speaking at local conferences? How did that process happen?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. My first conference I spoke at was in 2015. A former coworker of mine was doing this conference for people in the Nigerian banking industry, and not the princes, but people actually legit Nigerians.
Right.
And so he did this conference, and they did it in the States because security-wise, it was a lot more secure to bring in the speakers and all this. And even with having to fly in all the attendees from Africa, it was more secure that way and more cost effective. But that was my first opportunity, and I spoke there, and I wanted to speak more. But actually what even got me into speaking was they did the call for papers in 2013 for the B-Sides DFW, the Dallas-Fort Worth B-Sides.
Right.
And one of the people that coordinated the conference said the best job of his career he got because he spoke at conferences. And I thought, I need to do this, but I was really scared to speak in public. So I ended up going to Toastmasters to learn how to become a better speaker.
Right.
And most of all, overcome the fear. And so I spoke that one time, and I didn't speak again to 2018. But part of it was trying to come up with a unique topic to speak on. But what really got me really involved in speaking was teaching, because I started teaching at Dallas College in 2018.
Okay.
I started teaching pen testing, then added a web app pen testing course. And I saw these people, even before I became an adjunct instructor, I ran into a lot of people that were wanting to get into pen testing. So I was always sharing resources and trying to help them. Some people are going through the SCP. I would share resources for learning.
Right.
And so that got me interested in it. I saw the need to share with people how to get started in pen testing. So my class lecture that I gave at the beginning of the semester, and actually for some of the other instructors in the college that taught cybersecurity classes, I turned into a conference talk and gave it a B-Sides DFW in 2018 for the first time.
Okay. That's very cool.
And so then the speaking thing, the education piece, really kind of gave me something to speak on. I was also a Bug Crowd ambassador. And so being a Bug Crowd ambassador, I did some speaking for them, and it just really kind of helped me become like a brand ambassador, which helped my overall brand. But I just started submitting for CFPs for a lot of different conferences and spoke at a lot of different conferences and teaching workshops. And that's kind of how it all got started.
So do you remember the topic of your very first speaking engagement?
Yeah, it was the Pen Tester Blueprint.
Yeah, okay.
That was 2018, but the first one was actually pen testing web applications was the very first talk, the one for the Nigerian banking industry conference.
That's great. While you were talking, I was trying to remember. I remember the topic of mine, but I don't remember what the title was, but it was, I think it was how to hack an organization through Twitter or something equivalent to that. It's taking pictures off of Twitter and using that to profile the organization to find a way to get in. Anyway, that was a long time ago I did that. So, well, that's great. I heard you at lunch today. I heard you talking about the giving back in the industry, and we were kind of all talking about that. And that's one of the biggest things that I have seen in, going to all the different conferences that we go to, is you have those handful of people that will give back. And I think that's really important in the industry. You have to give back to the organization. You have to give back to the industry. You have to give back to the organization, of course. But helping those new people, helping with pen testing or helping them with blue team or compliance or whatever, really, that's how you transfer that knowledge, that's the way I've always looked at it anyway. I wanted to give that knowledge back to the next generation, the stuff that I learned and the stories that I had or the jokes that I have, give that to the next generation so that they can otherwise do it, coming up after us. So anyway, I really appreciate that. And I was only able to catch a little bit of your talk the other day, but it was a lot of fun. Spoiler, there is a bear involved in one of his presentations. Actually, it may be a lot of your presentations, so you guys will have to figure that out on your own. But okay, so let's talk about what interested you in Alias, for Alias Cybersecurity. First of all, we're all excited. The moment you accepted, it was a note went out to all the employees, and there was hooping and hollering and all kinds of partying and stuff. So, what interested you in entertaining the opportunity to come here?
Sure. Actually, how I first found out about Alias was back in 2021. It was at Texas Cyber Summit. Actually, it was HughesCon, maybe, where I first met Andrew Lemon that used to work here.
Yeah.
So I met Andrew, and we run into each other at conferences. I actually had him on my podcast, and then he was talking about the conference that you guys run.
Yeah.
So I submitted a talk there, and so when I spoke there last year, I got to meet a lot of people from the team.
Okay.
So I got to meet Tanner and Donovan and several others that I got to meet. And one of the experiences, every time I've always been around anyone, I've never had a bad experience. Everyone is always super nice. Looks like you guys always have fun. And, after being through some experiences where, it seems like some companies that all the focus is money is important, but sometimes when that's the most important thing, then a lot of things are missing out.
Yeah.
And just kind of seeing the culture here and how everyone was. And it's one of the last times, I guess, I actually saw Donovan at Texas Cyber Summit. So we saw each other there, and keep running to you guys. And when I was looking to make a move, needed another job, I thought about reaching out to Donovan and just said, hey, I'm looking for a job. Didn't know if there was any possibilities. And so I was very excited whenever you guys made me an offer.
Yeah. No, So Lemon, of course, he was here for at least several years, and I had worked with him at conferences and had him do some work for me at my previous job, and it's always a lot of fun to get with him and challenge him in terms of some of the attacks and stuff. So I met Tanner through Lemon. I knew Donovan beforehand, and I knew Andrew Nolan and a few others here. But it was that group of people, the same kind of group of people that you had interacted with, that got me here. And it really is. This is a fun place. I'll tell you, the reason why it's fun is because of the team.
Mhm.
It's the team that makes it fun. Whether it's the engineering side or the business side, or and we do have that, literally the sides of the building. Business side and the engineering side. But it's not like that. I mean, everyone gets together, everyone helps each other, everyone is there for each other. So I hope you really enjoy it here, because we're really excited to have you, and it is a lot of fun. The stuff that we're able to do, and I don't know if Donovan told you this. This is how you got me, or this is how you talked to me. Was I want you to come and help us help people. And that's what we do here, and that's what I'm really excited about. And it kind of feels like you're the same way. You want to help people, you want to improve them, educate them, help improve their systems, whatever. But it's to help the industry and help people.
Yeah, definitely.
So
And that's the good thing about the culture too, is it's top down from the CEO. Some places, maybe there's certain areas that are better than others, but it just seems to be, I don't know, good from the top down, which is good to see.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And for those of you who are looking for opportunities in the future, of course, I'm going to brag on Alias Cybersecurity, because I'm really proud to work here. I wear the AF brand proudly, and but that's one of the things that I always tell people is, the team is going to make it worthwhile. So wherever you go, go talk to people, go talk to the team members, go talk to the leadership, go talk to everybody. When it's right, you'll know it. So anyway, a little tidbit for you. Well, talk to us a little bit about your podcast. Because in our world, you are extremely famous. You've got a huge amount of followers, and everybody knows you. And I know this for a fact because everywhere that I went with you at Security Congress, everybody was coming up to you, and you knew everybody. So tell us about your podcast. Tell us about your the things that you do outside of your regular work.
Sure. So I've been podcasting for coming up on 4 years. The very first podcast I did was with Chloe, Miss Doggy, and Alyssa Miller. It was called the Uncommon Journey Podcast. And so we did that for about a year, and just got to where the two of them, they speak a lot at conferences too. So trying to schedule our 3 schedules plus the guests was kind of tough. So it's hard to get the podcast in. Things that kind of slowed down a little bit. And the people at ITSP Magazine came to us and asked if we wanted to start our own individual podcast. So I started the Hacker Factory podcast, and the goal originally was offensive security. And this kind of happens a lot because I have a meetup group. It's a DEF CON group now, DEF CON 940 in Denton, Texas.
Okay.
I used to run a group called the Pwn School Project, and I ran meetings in Denton and Dallas. The intent at first was offensive security focused, but then as I got into it, it's like, there's a lot of stuff needed on blue team. There's more blue team jobs than there are offensive security jobs, and so there's a need for this. So it expanded. And the same thing with my podcast, the Hacker Factory, I started out, it was going to be mainly hacking related offensive security. And as time going on, just learned the lesson again. This needs to be more broader scope. And so with the new podcast, I went independent back in April to do my own thing on my own. And this time I didn't call it anything related to just a specific type of security. Even left it open up enough if I wanted to do topics even outside of security. I just called it the Phillip Wylie Show. That way people know of me. They'll be able to find my new podcast. And also one of the things, mentioning things not specifically just cybersecurity, I had a trainer on for my gym that is a meditation practitioner. So he teaches people meditation, and a lot of times in cybersecurity, people are starting to learn that mental health is an issue, trying to avoid burnout and stuff. So I thought it'd be a good guest to have on there. So, like I said, not having the name specific, it leaves it open to any type of guest I want. So I started in April, but I've got over 53 or 54 episodes recorded. So I wanted to do I wanted to catalog since I was starting up new. So anyone to come along, there was a catalog of previous podcasts to listen to. So I got all those done, and I like to rest in December, take it a little easier, because you know how it gets in September, October, and November, the conferences, there's a lot going on, and then you're just kind of ready. You're starting to get almost burnt out, so you need to rest. So I record everything up ahead of time, so that way I can be done with my podcast. I'm actually pretty much done recording for the year.
Okay.
Just edit and publish those, and this time around I'm doing seasons, so I'm about to wrap up the first season and start season 2 in January. So
wow, that's crazy. That's a lot of effort. I mean, a lot of work, a lot of effort into that, just trying to make sure you get it in that short amount of time. That's impressive.
My previous podcast, I had a total of 118 episodes.
Wow.
And a little over 2 years.
That's great. Again, it goes back to giving back to the industry. Because you don't really make a lot of money in podcasting.
Nope.
Not in the cyber field anyway. At least I don't. And but it does feel good when you're able to get that out there and get that out and to help people.
Yeah, definitely. And a good example too. This is what keeps me going, because I run to conferences. At conferences, I run to people that listen to the podcast, that encourages them, and getting that feedback is what keeps me going with the podcast. I ran into a couple at Hack SpaceCon back in April, and he was a construction engineer going to school for cybersecurity, and he came to the conference because I was teaching a workshop there. Cool. And so when he stepped away, his wife was saying, "Thank you for doing the podcast." She said, "There's times I can't encourage him, but your podcast does."
Oh, that's great.
And so when I heard that, it's these are just kind of indicators I need to keep doing it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. That's great. That really is great. Wow. Well, we're getting up onto our time limit, but I do want to talk just a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve here at Alias. This is technically his very first day here. We've been talking about him for the last couple of weeks or so, off and on, but this is your first day here at the office, first day working at Alias. So what are you looking forward to? What is it you're excited about here?
Well, just really one of the things I think that I'll be able to help a lot is just bring more brand awareness to the company.
Yep.
There's some situations you walk into and you say, yeah, I could really help this company out because they need it. Technical side, I can't imagine being able to do much there, but I just know with my following and my brand, I can help bring awareness to the company. And when I go to work for companies, I want to work somewhere, I've worked for like the banks and stuff, the Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500. It's really kind of hard to help, but smaller organizations is easier to help. So part of my goal is to help the company, help them get more business and be more successful. So I plan to leverage my network and social media to help bring awareness to Alias and get more work and help get the good word out on us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm personally excited, number one, to learn from you. And to work with you. I mean, you've got such a background in pen testing and the podcasting and everything that you do. So that made me really excited in terms of bringing that skill set here to Alias. But just on a personal level, I'm really excited to pick your brain and to engage. So we're all very, very excited. I've said that several times. It's because we're excited.
I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah. This is going to be fun. I really think that this is going to be a great opportunity for us to grow and to take advantage of what you bring us. So, with that said, I think that we're going to end this introduction to Phillip. We are glad that he is here. We've got great opportunities coming forward, and again, our next podcast is going to get more into specific. How does somebody get into pen testing and what they need to do to start thinking about that? And really because it is different than what it was 15 years ago. even different from what it was 10 years ago. So we're excited to sit down and really talk about that. So, Phillip, thank you again for coming on the podcast with us. Thank you for coming into Alias Cybersecurity. Everybody else, I will, I'll end the podcast here, and you guys have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you next time on the next podcast. Thanks, everybody.